trunk. I'm sorry, administrative mode now is trunk, whereas it was different before. So if we go over here onto switch 1 and do a show interface FA013 switch port, it's set for dynamic desirable still. And if I do a show interface trunk, as you can see, we have a trunk formed. So one side set unconditionally to trunk. If I do a show interface trunk on switch 2, you can see that. See here where it says mode is desirable, and then here it says mode is on. So basically this means that it's unconditionally in trunking status. So if one side is set unconditionally to trunk and the other one's set for desirable, that will cause a trunk to form. Also, as you might also be thinking, if we go ahead here on switch 1 and do switch port trunk encapsulation .1q and then switch port mode trunk, as you might imagine, if I do a show interface trunk, now you can see that we have a trunk link formed between the two switches and the mode is set for on. So both sides are unconditionally trunking. We can see this if we do a do show run interface FA013. You can see here the switch port mode is trunk. Okay, so let's look at the last thing we have here with dynamic trunking protocol, and then we'll end this video. As you can see, both sides are set to trunk, and the trunk has a trunk link has been performed between these two switches. If I go up here and do a no switch port mode trunk on both sides, and as you can see here, we have the trunk link has come up again because we have desirable on both sides now. We should. So if I do a do show interface trunk on switch 2, as you can see here, both sides are set to their default configs on the switch ports, which is dynamic desirable. Okay, so if I go into one side here and do a switch port no negotiate, as you see here it says command rejected, conflict between no negotiate and dynamic status. Okay, so what this is telling us here is you cannot have your switch port in non-negotiate when the DTP mode is desirable, or I'm sorry, in dynamic status. So if you have it as dynamic auto or dynamic desirable. So basically, so what that means is that you have to have either your port hard-coded as in an access port or a trunking port, and we'll see this here. If we do switch port mode access and then switch port non-negotiate, does take there. So if we go to switch 1 and we do a switch port mode trunk and do a switch port no negotiate, as you can tell here, one side set to access, set for non-negotiate, one side set for trunking, non-negotiate. Obviously, no trunk is going to be formed. Actually, hold on. Am I in the right port here? Show run interface FA013. Switch port mode trunk, switch port non-negotiate. On switch 2, if I do a show run interface FA013. Oh, of course. Okay, so let's do this. You can see switch 2, no trunk being formed there. Switch 1, as you can see, it's trying to trunk, but of course, um, it's not going to form a neighbor with switch 2. Because switch 2 is set for an access port. So we do a show interface FA013 and do switch ports. As you can see here, its administrative mode is statically defined as an access port. Negotiation of trunking, as you can see here, is off. And then we can verify that if we do a show run interface FA013. As you can see here, we do switch port non-negotiate on switch 1.